Ask the Podcast Coach for September 22nd, 2018.
Let's get ready to podcast.
I'm dancing by myself. Hey, it's Saturday morning. It's time to get your podcast questions answered live. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach. I'm your host, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting. Jim is out mudslacking at the moment. And if you're like, what? What is a mud slack? I have no idea, but Jim is, I'm sorry, I keep saying slack. It's mud. He's getting his mud jacked, which I was going to say it sound dirty. I get it. Dirty mud. Woo! We're starting off the day right here at Ask the Podcast Coach. We are here every Saturday morning, 10:30 Eastern time. If you would like to join in on the conversation, you can just come over to askthepodcastcoach.com/join. Apparently his mud has been jacked. It's the one and only Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. How's it going, Jim?
Yikes. I'm not sure where to go with that one. I literally just, I was hoping the guys would wrap up the job, and I need to turn my lights on too. So yeah, the mud has been jacked and the steps are even, and there's no longer a trip hazard. So
this is the thing where they were sticking mud under your steps to raise them up or something like that.
Yeah. So they come out with big tools and they drill into the concrete, and then they pump mortar down to lift the stairs up. And I had about a 4-inch trip hazard on my sidewalk. And so they fixed that and got some things straight. And so it's always fun. I love that. It's like Legos, like adult Legos. I love watching guys and gals who know what they're doing, who are professionals, do a job right. And so they did a nice job of, it's a 50s sidewalk. So there, you can't put lipstick on a pig. It's not going to fix it like that, but it is fixed. So,
all right. I have a question for you, Jim, which is great because we now know that you don't know this.
Okay.
Or her.
That's okay.
Oh, wow. All right. I have noticed that you can now, there's a setting for your woman in the tube where you can have her listen longer.
Right.
And if you say thank you, she'll go, no problem.
Right. Or you're welcome. Or
yeah, because I do thank my robot on a regular basis.
It's a habit, right? You're
right.
Like, hey, turn the lights on, and then they do, and you're like, hey, thank you, and they're like, no problem.
Do you watch a lot of TV?
I don't, but I watch some, but not a lot. I'm busy podcasting.
When you watch TV, are you doing anything else?
Oh, totally. Yeah, because I watch it down here, and so I have something going on the screen here, and then I'm working. So I have Facebook up, and I'm monitoring our communities, and I'm doing Twitter, and I'm doing all those things. So yes, when I watch TV or a movie, I'm doing something else.
All right. When you listen to the radio, assuming you occasionally listen to the radio, maybe?
Just a little bit music, maybe from time to time when I've run out of podcasts.
Are you doing anything else when you're doing that?
It's usually in the car driving.
Yeah. So that would be a yes.
So yes.
When you listen to a podcast, are you doing anything else?
Same. I think radio and podcasting for me would be the same.
See, because the reason I say this, for me, in most cases, now granted, if you want to count walking as something else, but most of the time, like I can't listen to podcasts and work at Liston. I was like, oh man, I'm going to be working in front of a computer. I'm going to listen to podcasts. I can't do it because 9 times out of 10, I'm listening with the intent of taking notes for most of my podcasts. There are a few that I'll listen to and I can, kind of put on in the background like radio because it's more entertaining than educational or something like that. But I was listening to a podcast, The Word of Mouth, or whatever the one podcast is that I mentioned a couple weeks ago. And they were talking about how when people watch TV, they usually are doing something else. And I was like, yep, check for me. It's usually, and there are times when I'm eating my lunch and checking my phone while I'm watching TV. Like I'm never just watching TV. Yeah. And I don't have a radio in my house, but if I did, I'd be probably vacuuming or something like that. I'm with you in that case. The only time I listen to radio is if I'm in the car and I don't feel like hooking up my phone and that whole 9 yards. But usually if I'm listening to a podcast, if we want to count walking or exercising, but it's not like I'm listening to a podcast while I don't know, do financial stuff and put, I use, you need a budget. I'm not going to be doing that while I'm listening to podcasts because both those kind of require my undivided attention.
Yeah, well, that's the key that you just said is your undivided attention. I think most of us listen to podcasts to learn.
Mhm.
and we're interested in the content. And we know humans can't really multitask. So working and listening to a podcast, you're doing one or the other. You're working poorly or listening to the podcast. You're working well and you're listening to the podcast poorly. So, I know a lot of folks used to listen to a lot of talk radio that they'd put in the background. I don't think they were really listening, though. It was just a voice in the background. And I think you can do that with podcasting. I think you can throw a bunch of long play podcasts on. But I think the content is so designed for education in a lot of cases, right? Most podcasters are doing things because they want to communicate a point. Where talk radio, it's kind of to fill time. I mean,
Yeah, very much so.
Think about the Rush Limbaughs or the Harvey Oswalds. I just made that name up. It's a good name, right?
It is.
Harvey Oswald. Lots of people just put those on as background noise. And I'm not sure they're really expecting, or they're gonna kind of come in and out of the conversation. Also, the format of radio is very different. Radio is very repetitive. Like you might hear the same things over and over. Traffic and weather on the nines. And you're like, oh, I need to listen for a second because they're going to talk about the weather, and then you tune it back out. Or podcasts are more linear, right? They're more beginning to end. We're not going to repeat. We're not necessarily going to go back and repeat the same things we did at the beginning of the show. And so you kind of have to listen. I mean, I think it's one of those things you do.
One of the few things I listen to on the radio is Jim Rome. He's a sports guy. And it's mainly, there's a guy, talk about somebody who's not boring. But what's weird is if you listen to him in the car, it's like, there's a traffic light by my house. It's literally like, we do this weird thing in Ohio where we have 6 roads come together, and then you have one traffic light that's like 20 minutes by the time you actually get to go through the thing. It's ridiculous. Yeah. And I remember one day I was sitting there and he did that, hey, here's the thing and the sports and here's the main story and I can't believe it and blah, 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 blah.
Have a take and don't suck. And
have a take and don't suck. And he did his main opening thing. And then I remember I went through the light and I forget where I was going, but as I was like pulling into Home Depot or something like that, he basically said the same thing again, like almost repeated himself verbatim. And I'm like, and I was like, okay, I understand it's radio and people tune in and tune out, but it wasn't like a quick reset of what he just did. He basically said the same thing, hey, today we're talking about such and such. And I was like, yeah, you just said that like 7 minutes ago. I was like,
well, so Rome is pretty famous for that. Like, he is very repetitive. And so he's kind of known for that, but lots of folks in the chat room talking about listening to classical music or jazz. I think music without words are pretty easy to listen to. So Lady Gaga, that would be, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah. So like, some of that music, right, is easy to, because you're not really, to be honest, you're not really listening to the music. I think if you found yourself in the zone at work and you were fully engaged in what you were doing, your brain is not even registering the music that is there. Like you're really not hearing it. You think you are, but you're not. So,
well, I was listening to a podcast last week. I think it's called Beyond Podcasting. And I actually, this is how much it drove me nuts. I'm on my phone and I go to their website and I went to leave a speak pipe because I had speak pipe thing. Well, I was on my phone. So I was by default in Safari, and apparently speak pipe doesn't work in Safari. So I had to switch to Chrome. So I had to copy the address, go over, load Chrome, get it to come on, paste. Wait, no, hold, come on, paste it. Okay, paste, good, go. Speak pipe. Okay, now do you want to do this here? Do you want to launch the app? Okay, launch the app. Let's do that. Record finally. Because about every other, like he'd ask a question, like, what's your favorite microphone, Jim? And Jim would say, I don't know. I like the ATR 2100, beyond podcasting.com. And then Jim, so tell me about this mud jacking business. Well, I had some mud and it got jacked. Beyond podcast. I mean, like, every question he had a thing. And I was like, dude, this isn't radio. You don't need to keep redoing that. And his answer was, I think I do. And I went, well, all right, that's your thing. Yeah. But to me, that is not, in my opinion, you don't have to keep receiving.
But radio guys will do that because they're comfortable in that space. I'm here with Dave Jackson. Yeah. We're talking about podcasting today. Dave, tell me that, and it's a what do they call that? A recall or a reset or a reset?
See, that I don't mind. Mm-hmm. If I was in the middle of that, like I should be doing this because we're live. I should be saying, hey, if you have a question, just come on out to askthepodcastcoach.com/live. Mm-hmm. Or if you want to join in on the conversation, askthepodcastcoach.com/join. And I do that once at the beginning, and then like Miss Eileen just joined. She doesn't know how to join, so I should be saying, askthepodcastcoach.com/join.
Yeah.
So that
You
makes
should
sense
have
if you're live.
You should have a 15-minute countdown timer that
I should.
flashes at you, right? So that you know every 15 minutes. One, did you start the recording?
I did.
Good. Two, are you doing the reset where you're saying, hey, you can join us live, askthepodcastcoach.com/live/join or whatever it is. And you know what I mean? So yeah, no, I think it's but I wouldn't I guess I wouldn't fault radio guys for doing resets on a regular. It's just their well, think of the nature. I mean, radio, it's just so easy to click in between. I think if podcasting was like that, where you had presets and you could just flip in between them quickly, and it was more live in nature, yeah, I think we'd probably need to do that as well. But I just think podcasting's more linear.
Yeah, Ryan in the chat room says if I forget what podcast I'm listening to, I can just look at my phone, because I did that
on radio too. Like when you're listening to iHeartRadio, you can. So no, that doesn't work. Sorry, Ryan. You can, yes, but that's not why they reset, right? It's a whole different. The audience has a different set of expectations as to what they're doing.
Yeah, I used to do that on my very first podcast on the Musicians Cooler, but it was in between segments. I would just have this big whoosh and it'd say musicianscooler.com, and then I'd go to my next segment because I was just trying to pound the website into your head.
It's not bad marketing. If you can do it correctly, it's not bad marketing to do some resets on this. Like we just said, like for us, what you just said on how to join, that's a good reset. I think even having, especially if you're a new brand, you might want to have some strategically placed brand awareness in what you're doing so people know where to go. It took me forever to brand theaverageguy.tv. It was not intuitive. And that's one, you have a bad brand when it's not intuitive. You want people to be able to just latch onto it pretty easily. But it took me a while to do that. And I had to say it a lot and print it a lot and type it a lot and say it a lot, in the program. So it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge. I'm not sure as podcasters, we need to do the exact same things as radio for resets, because we it's just a different medium. People listen to it differently or have a different set of expectations.
Yeah. The chat room here is saying, and this is interesting because we had a problem with this on Podcasters Roundtable, that Chatwing is basically, I think we have a wheel falling off here, and
I think we do too, to be honest,
because they're saying it doesn't load in Firefox or Chrome. And I know I realized this from the podcast. My Ask the Podcast Coach right now is not on a secure server. I don't have HTTPS set up on this website. And you're like, really? I'm like, okay, well, and we're not positive. But Ray did something on Podcasters Roundtable, and Chatwing is no longer compatible. And it seems like it's not compatible for a number of people here. So we may be looking at a new chat system here.
I've been using it for 4 years, and it hasn't changed. They've very little updates to it. And we use it at work. So I use it at Gallup. And there's really no reason, to be honest with you. When Hangouts first came out, there was no chat system to it.
Right.
And now it has a fairly robust system associated with it, and you can disconnect it from the video. I think you can embed it. I think maybe I need to look and switch over or think about, because we're already in the Google Hangout infrastructure, right? So why wouldn't I just use Google and that chat stays with the video? It doesn't. I wish it made it comments, which I don't think it does. But
yeah.
Anyways, Miss Eileen has jumped in.
Yes. How are you? Oh, and then she's
not ready.
No, she didn't hear us yet. Wait. There we go. Got to get her earbuds in.
She's hooking things up.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
All right.
What's going on?
A question.
All right.
Okay, now I realize I need to turn this up. No, that's not working for me.
It's a good thing you're a podcaster.
So I have a question, and it has to do with Podcast Connect or iTunes Connect. I don't even know what it's called anymore.
Right. Good old Podcast Connect.
Am I echoing?
Not to us.
Not to us, but apparently to you.
Okay. So
yeah, she's hearing herself back.
Yeah, I'm gonna say
you need to close the. You had the live show open.
That's
you
it.
need to close that.
Yeah.
Yeah, turn off your radio is what they used to say
That's what it is.
in the
All right,
business.
Paul.
Hey, could you turn off your radio?
User error, user error. Okay. So, does anyone know what the threshold is to start seeing stats?
Oh, that's
And
a good question.
like, how many downloads do you need before it stops saying not enough data? Because it's been a long time that it's not enough data.
Yeah, that's true. Everybody log in to their account. That's what I'm doing. And seeing what the smallest number I get. Because some of them I don't expect to get any stats.
Anybody knows, Daniel knows. Just let's just be honest here. So we should let's give it 30 seconds and Daniel will tell us in the chat.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest.
Let me see. That's my podcast.
Because
Eileen,
what I'm looking at, I'm going to look at Liston to see what it tells me is, you know, user agents or whatever.
Okay, I'm really surprised. I'm getting some on Building a Better Dave because that show maybe gets 100 downloads an episode, maybe a little more.
So real quick, in Liston, I see Apple Core Media 103,
Okay.
iTunes 26.
Okay. That's what one, and don't forget iTunes Stored. That's a third one.
Yeah, Apple HomePod 1. Woohoo!
So I have a podcast that has 19 and is telling me no, not enough data, and I have one that has 41. No, this is the number of devices. So, and then it does have data. So in these, so I don't know if it's based on number of devices or if it's a number, but it's okay. The point is, it's still a fairly small number, I think. When we think about, I'm getting an average of 1 hour per device. I'm getting, I have 41 devices, so that gives me 41 total hours, and I'm getting about an average of 1 hour per device. So, Eileen, I don't think it's gigantic.
Yeah,
I guess is what I'm saying. I don't think that number's super big.
According to, I'm looking at one of my shows in Simplecast, and I've had 1,087 downloads in Apple Podcasts. I've had 217 downloads in iTunes, and I get the old not enough data. So
okay. So I just thought maybe with all the support work that you're doing, you've been able to come up with what is the threshold? I don't know. Like, do they want to always leave us in mystery? Like, if you get 2 views on YouTube, guess what? YouTube tells you got 2 views.
2 views.
Like, what are we like not significant enough for them to like start counting?
Sounds like it. Sounds like it. I also
yeah.
don't see downloads. I see time listened. And so at least in what I'm in, it seems like the emphasis is on number of devices and the time per device, as opposed to that listen, that number, that one that says they're more focused on kind of time. So maybe there's a time threshold that says, hey, it has to be at least to listen to, to be honest, with 500,000 podcasts in their system and a whole bunch of podcasts that get nothing. And I'm sure they have to run some batch processes to make this thing work. I'm sure they're kind of saying like, hey, at some point you need to be, you need to at least have this before we're running it. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying
not buying it, Jim. I'm not buying it because, like I said, if you're on YouTube and YouTube has way more, billions and billions of views.
Well, but Google's a data company and Apple is not. This is the problem.
Yeah, and Liston's showing me that it's just that I can't see when people are, tuning out and all that other stuff, because I'm not really so concerned about. It's not like I push people to listen on Apple Podcasts, but I just feel like, okay, at some point, you guys should be showing me something. I mean, this is supposed to be one of the great benefits of being able to log in. And it's been since November. What? It's almost a year. Yeah, almost a year.
Because I'm like the Alexa Cast has stats. Bernie the Cat does not. More Podcast Money does not. Because of my podcast does not. Now there's another one that gets maybe I don't know, a couple hundred downloads. So it's the question there is it the number of downloads, or like Jim said, maybe it's the number of devices?
Maybe.
Or
Or,
maybe
or how
it's-
long you're listening, how long people are listening. It could be maybe people that see it on the podcast app, they click on it and then they're like, nah, that's not what I thought it was.
Maybe it's 40 hours because I have one that's at 37, and it has no data, and I have one at 41 and it does. So maybe it's
Wait,
maybe it's 40
so-
hours total.
So how do you know it's 37 if there's no data?
No, because in the listing, so I'm under shows and all categories under podcast analytics. It has all my shows listed. Oh, I have a Gallup one in there. I need to get moved over. And so it has all those shows listed, and then
I
it says
see. Total
devices,
time
total time
listed.
listen. Yeah.
So
So 37, no, 40, yes, or it's 41. So maybe 40 hours is the cutoff.
Maybe
I'm
that's
totally guessing. Daniel does say the data is delayed 72 hours.
Yeah, and it's only the last X amount of days too. That's the other thing. It's kind of a snapshot. I know that.
I'm not sure these are right.
Can we go back to what Daniel said? 72 hours from the time that it shows up in Apple. I don't know what
That's
to
what
call
it, yeah. It would
Okay. Because that's going to be different from when you published, right? Because
Yeah,
it
who
takes
knows?
time to get over there from.
who knows?
Well, and I just shot your theory down because Building a Better Dave has 21 hours.
And it has data.
And it has data.
Well, there you go.
Has 24 devices.
Although this is in the last, are you looking at the last 60 days? That's what.
I'm just looking on that front page. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, I'm in the 60-day range. So, yeah, I don't know. That's a super good question, by the way. I have no idea. This is the first time I've been in Podcast Connect in about 6 months.
I
don't get into this. It just doesn't. And I know I should.
Well,
But it drives me nuts because they're all pretty poor. I mean, at least Liston, Blueberry, Spreaker, at least they try.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they are trying. Todd and Rob, those guys, Rob Greenlee, they really do care about it, and they're trying. Apple's just not. They're just not even trying it, and neither is Google. To be honest, they just don't. It's such a blip. Like these hippie podcasters. We have to talk to them again. They're such a pain in that. They can't. They want their stats perfect.
Well, I know what they're going to say. If you say, "Can you please let us know what the criteria is?" They're going to say no, because if we let you know what the criteria is, then I'm going to go over and grab a bunch of iPhones at the Apple Store and do this so I can get my number of devices. Yeah, well, I do that anyway. My wife one time rolled her eyes so hard. She's like, I was at an Apple store. She goes, "What are you doing?" And I go, "I'm subscribing to my show." And she goes, "Oh, good God, seriously?"
Yeah, but it doesn't do anything. That's the thing. I got to the point where I want engagement, not subscribe. You know, I don't want subscribe numbers. I want engagement. So how many people sign up for my mailing list? How many people actually open the email that I send on my mailing list? I just sent one out this morning. And, you know, I'm getting about a 15% open rate, which is okay, but it's not, you know, a list of 400. You're kind of like, that's not great. And how many people buy T-shirts when I offer those? I've been giving away these HelloFresh coupons for weeks now. How many people take me up on that? Those are kind of the numbers that I'm more interested in. I've really stopped ignoring. Different at work, however, they do want the download numbers, so I do have to provide those numbers for them at work. So I do.
Okay, all right, and I don't know. I tweeted to Daniel as well as James Critlin. Is anybody tracking how often this Podcast Connect has been down in the last, I don't know, I'll say 6 months.
I can explain that easy.
Oh, I know what. Okay, go ahead.
Apple breaks stuff right before they announce anything. Anytime, if you go back in history, I don't know what they're doing behind the scenes or what, but right before they announce big stuff, they break everything. I don't know what is going on. If they're like, "Oh, well, we got to have this rolled out because the new big thing is coming," and they go, and everything goes, goosh.
It's like all the people move from one. They're like, just walk away from your desk and get up and go to the other desk to work on the new thing, because your computer over here, we don't want you to touch it.
Because I remember when that went down, and we're like telling people, like, they're like, "Hey, we're ready to submit our stuff to Apple," and we're like, "Hey, here's how you do it as soon as it comes back online. And that was not a fun email to send, and people were not happy, and the whole like,
I know.
Liston, you suck. And we're like, it's not us, really. It's not
no, and you guys got a lot of explaining to do, but a lot of it is related to Apple.
Yeah. And we went to and then when somebody said, wait a minute, they're like, wait, what's tomorrow? And we're like, oh, it's the big announcement. They're like, there you go, that's why it's broken. I'm like, you know what, there's a pattern of that.
But
so.
There's been a time when it was down for like 2 weeks in the summer.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, even when it came back up, it went back down again.
Yeah.
But that one was only for like 2 days. That's why I wanted to know if anybody was keeping track of just of the downtime, not the uptime, the downtime.
Well, what's really sad is with Google launching Google Podcasts, if they really want, I mean, you want to attack when your enemy is vulnerable. And they just kind of like, here's our app. Hope you like it. Oh, by the way, we're working on this other thing now too. And I was like, no, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Okay. All right. So my mysteries are still there. Hey, can I give a little plug for my international podcast?
Oh, absolutely.
Day. Next Sunday, the September the 30th at 7 a.m. Eastern. 7 a.m. Eastern.
That's early.
I know that's early for a lot of you folks, but there is someone in the family that does have stats in Podcast Connect, and that would be my darling daughter, Nicole Purvey, and Better Than Success Podcast. So I'm going to be talking about her podcast and her podcasting journey.
Nice.
I would love to get her on here because of my podcast, but she's busy.
Well, we're there anytime you want it. So
yes. But so I'll be doing, talking about that and encouraging folks to, think about some other things when they're talking about the success of their podcast. It doesn't always come from being able to get into iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
Yes, influence, right? That's you're looking for some form of influence, right? So, Eileen, thanks for coming on.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Take care.
See, now I'm completely obsessed with Apple, whatever it is, Podcast Connect, because I realized there's a thing where you can go and change your date range. So when I look at last month for Building a Better Dave, when there were no new episodes, I as you might imagine, I had nothing. But when I switched to September, I had 13 devices, 1 hour per device.
I think that's wrong.
Yeah, it's
that number's wrong.
Well, what's interesting is they just came out with I think it's podcaster.apple.com with best practices and stuff. This is where they need to understand their audience. And there are podcasters are, whether you are when you start, you will eventually become a little more geekier than you were when you first started your podcast. And we want to know the bells and whistles and things like that. No, it does not have my blessing. They do something to they do something to my episode. They're not bad.
What was the question?
I'm sorry. Carrie says Simplecast has my blessing. I want to know because they changed my format. I think they somehow and if Addie's listening, she's not in the chat room today. They do something to my podcast when I upload it, because when I upload it, it's like, hey, we're processing your file. We'll let you know when it's done. And I'm like, you shouldn't be doing anything to my file. Mm-hmm. But I like their player. Their stats are okay. They're not a horrible choice. They're by no means, SoundCloud, Squarespace, Anchor, blah, blah, blah. But, and they just hired Mike Murphy, by the way.
Oh, did not know that.
They hired Mike Murphy and they hired Addie Saucedo.
Yeah, I knew Addie was over there.
Yeah. So, Podbean is okay. My typical things are Libsyn, Blueberry, if you want everything on WordPress, Podbean, Spreaker. No, see, Spreaker doesn't pass I like Spreaker, but they don't pass my one criteria of unlimited back catalog. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, it's going to take you probably 5 years to fill up your space, but they don't have unlimited back catalog. So one of the things I want to play with is I want to play more with Podbean. I have the only show I've ever put over there was the Grumpy Old Man cussing at people. It was a joke podcast, and I just wanted to do that. So I actually want to swap that one out, put that on a free media host, and let it die somewhere. And then I'm going to take the because again, anytime I test something, I need content. And I'm going to take, you know, how at the end of the year, and I'll do it again this year too, where I have people send in what their favorite podcast is and why. I'm going to take those segments and make each one of those their own episode. So I've got like probably 50, 60 episodes of that probably at this point. I've been doing that 3 years, and just make it a weekly podcast, and just enough to, here it is, you know, just kick the tires on it. Plus they have a ad insertion service. And I'm assuming that's the same thing everybody else is doing, where you get your lovely $1.50 per 1,000 downloads. Yay! Where will I spend it all?
I think you got to pay attention though in the ad space. We talked about this at the beginning of the year. You know, we make these predictions, and I think this year is the year. We're getting a little late in the year, but I think someone figures out. This was my prediction. Somebody figures out how to do this ad thing right. And, you know, like other things, I think as podcasters, we need to keep our eye on the ad ball, so to speak, and that we're not just totally disregarding it because it doesn't work today. I do think someone's going to get it right. And, you know, it is a little bit of a race to the bottom in some regards. I mean, it's just, well, but I mean, as it makes sense though, right? As things get more efficient, it should get cheaper for the advertisers to be able to do this. And so, you know, and we're small market stuff. And again, if we're going to try and go after ads in the general market, those are they're not going to pay. You have to go in ads in your niche, and you probably need to negotiate your own ads. So that's the story today, right? If you're going to really do this and do it well. But I do think we need to pay attention to what's going on out there. It's getting there. There's a lot of money being thrown at ad insertion right now. And I think eventually someone's going to get it right, and it's going to click, and it's going to work. Now, who does that? I don't know. I don't think we're there yet, but I think it's going to happen eventually.
I forget who asked this question. I want to say it was Corey. I'm scrolling up through the chat, and it's Clay. Said, I recently had a couple episodes that were 80% unique to total downloads as opposed to the 63%. Does that mean those episodes were somehow better or just a fluke? Can you expand on that? I'm not sure I understand the question. 80% total downloads were unique as opposed to 63%, because in reality, and this is what's confusing, is in Libsyn, there is a stat that shows your, well, let me share my screen here. There's a total downloads, and then there is, so if I go to my stats in Libsyn, now you'll see this show was started after November 2017. So my unique downloads and my all-time downloads are the exact same thing. So you basically, and the legacy downloads are 0. If I switch to the School of Podcasting, which was started back when dirt was invented, and I look at my stats, you'll see where I have 1,565,000 before November 2017. I have 322,000 after November 2017, and I have a total of 1.88 million total. And this I hate this phrase, unique downloads. That I find that confusing. I wish it just said post November 17, 2017, pre-November 2017. That would stop people from, I think, being confused, but it's tricky.
Well, so, is that legacy download really to keep people from freaking out because the numbers drop so much?
It stops you from having to go in. I'm with you on that, because why not just show, to me, why not just show all-time downloads? And then if you want to go see your old stuff, click on the legacy button in the upper right-hand corner.
Well, but if the old stuff was wrong, like this is what we've all admitted, right? Is that the old way of counting things was not right, and IAB or somebody came up with a standard, right? And said, no, it needs to be this way, and we've adapted. Wouldn't we want to apply the new standards to the old numbers?
Do you know how long that would take? I mean, we are applying that to 2017 numbers. So you'll get, if you want, you can, that's going there. But when you have I have no idea how many customers.
I get you.
30,000, customers times 5 billion downloads.
I get you. It's the same problem. You got all these stats. You got to go back and that takes processing power to go back and get those kind of things done. But I think from a podcaster's perspective, the way we think about it, if the standards had changed, I would want that to go across all my stats, and I wouldn't even be thinking about the old stats anymore because those aren't. I mean, yeah, it was a hit. Like I remember going in on my Blueberry stats and going, "Oh, yikes!" I've always been saying, 1,500 to 2,000, and now it's more like, "Oh, it's just under 1,000," right? And that's kind of an ego hit. But
and Daniel's saying not all the old numbers were wrong. But there was a period introduced on one of the iOS versions where the numbers slowly started being inflated. So
it's exactly the same, but completely different. I mean, you're like, no, they were like, we have a new way. Let's just say, for example, no, we won't say right or wrong. We have a new way of measuring. I would think we would want to apply those going back. Yeah, I know, I get it. It causes a bunch of issues and all those other things, but as podcaster, I would want those applied going back because I want it consistent, right? I think we learned some things about the way we count stuff, and I think we're smarter about it today than we were then. So,
but if you want to jump in on the conversation, we would be happy to have you. Right now, though, we're going to talk about, speaking of people jumping in, we want to thank these lovely people for jumping in to support the show. That is our awesome supporters. You can go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome and jump on in. And people like Josh Liston from onthebubblepodcast.com, Greg from debtshepherd.com, Jonathan Bloom from weeklyawesome.com, Glenn the Geek Hebert, who I believe is finally home after hanging out in a hurricane in North Carolina for a week. That had to be fun. Josh Rivers from podcastingexperiments.com, Max Trescott from aviationnewstalk.com, Shane from spybrary.com, Military Money Movement over at millmoneymovement.com/podcast.
That's a great logo, by the way. That logo is dynamite. I love it. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, it's cool.
That's a good looking logo.
And a new one. The one and only Ronsley from wearepodcast.com has a company, Amplify Media Group. You can find it at mustamplify.com. You'll actually see his thing. You'll have a thing that he has a book out, and he has links to his conference. And if I did this right, yes. Now I do remember Barry Kessler at barrykessler.com. Remember last week how I said this keeping up with the patron thing is sometimes a bit of a hassle? Not a hassle. It's tricky. And Barry politely reached out and said, did I not as far as I know, I'm still paying you. And I'm like, he is. So Barry, sorry about that. Check out Barry over at barrykessler.com. But I believe now the PowerPoint, unless somebody else emails me and go, I think you missed me. I think we're all cut up and we should be good to go. So now I just go and look at the notifications and that whole 9 yards. And if you haven't already, the roast of Dave Jackson is now available for our $5 or more patrons. And if you're easily offended, please don't watch that. Boy, that is
not safe for work. Is that what you're saying?
Not safe for work at all. But Jim, we have another question coming in. This will be great. Awesome.
Kim's jumping in. Hey, Kim.
There Kim, she is.
Can you hear us?
Not yet, apparently.
She's getting that figured out. Sometimes you got to switch the settings over.
You got to click the thingy, and then the whatchamacallit thingy is going down. And right now, her microphone is still up by her ear, I think.
Get the squirrels going. Kim, can you hear us?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Awesome.
What's going on?
I have a question about sound effects in my podcast.
Okay.
I am currently writing a script, and it's going to have a list of about 8 items. And if I were doing this in a copywriting form, I would put asterisks or some kind of bullet points. But I want to do something fun, so I'm thinking sound effects.
Okay.
What kind of sound effects can you use to indicate a list that aren't things that sound like you're bleeping out some foul language?
A list. Like a ding, maybe?
Well, dings seem to come across to me like somebody has just deleted a word that they didn't want to go out so they wouldn't be perceived as explicit.
So give me an example of what's being said that you want to add a sound effect to.
Well, if I just created a list of things like, here are 5 impromptu prompts to introduce impromptu speaking to your class. You can use props. You can use weird questions. You can use boring questions. So you see there's a list there, but I want to be able to break these up some way that doesn't sound like I'm checking out now.
Adding like a swoosh or like a tick could do that.
Well, a
right?
tick would be interesting. Yeah, because that's not going to be sounding like I'm trying to get rid of some sound that.
Yeah, I mean, if you found the sound of someone taking a pencil and checking it off, where it's kind of thing, where you get that sound of check like that, you could be creative in that, something like that, or a swoosh of some kind, or a.
I know I've done the ding thing in the past because to me it's like Family Feud when the answer's there, ding. Yeah. So it'd be like all you have to do is know your audience, ding. Make good content, ding. Do it on a regular basis, ding. And don't be boring, ding. Okay. When you said don't be boring, I pictured some sort of sound effect for that. But now you're into like possible cheesy land.
Yeah. And I don't want to go into cheesy land, but I do want to have some kind of sound that I'm going to reuse on a regular basis through this podcast. I'm just not really sure what ideas are out there, I guess.
Or do you do things like, hey, before we get to the next thing, let's talk about 5 things you can do to make your blah, blah, blah. And you just start happy music. Number 1, be happy. Number 2, don't be sad. Number 3, try not to let life get you down. Number 4, do drugs,
have a music. In other words, have a music bed underneath that point and then fade it out when you're done. That's another way. It's good. Another good way of pulling that list out.
That is a great idea. I wouldn't have come up with that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that is a good idea.
Thank you. All right. I will let the other guests come on.
All right. Kim, good to see you.
Good seeing you. Bye-bye.
Right. Thank you for goodness. Wow, Dave, we're like setting records here today.
I know. It's amazing. Clay, what's going on? He's out in the middle of somewhere, right? Is that the skyline?
He's in a field mowing or something, I think.
Excellent.
So he's frozen now, so hopefully he didn't get sucked underneath the mower.
It never fails. The minute
and we'll see if he can.
So Clay, when you become unfrozen, feel free to jump in and
keep an eye on him to see if he frees up.
Yes, and
Dave, while he's doing that,
sorry, that was Glenn.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Don't be boring.
It's my favorite sound effect.
So this week I moved studios. Actually, last night I moved studios at Gallup, not here, but at Gallup. And I'm now lovingly referring to the old studio as Studio A. I was actually in a conference room that when I moved up there 4 years ago, nobody was on the floor. I had the whole floor to myself. It was not even a.
Oh, nice.
Moved in. Well, in the last 4 years, it's filled up for the most part. And we do a engagement survey a couple times a year, and the employees started saying, "Hey, why does Collison have his own conference room? And we could use like that. We only have one conference room on the floor. It would be nice to have that one back." And so the facilities guy came to me and said, "Would you move?" I said, "Yeah, no worries." So we're now moving into Studio B. So I took Sarah with me last night. We went out to work and started moving equipment. I do webcasts all during the week, and so I want to have this in and done before Monday, so I could do some troubleshooting on Monday and make sure all the services are up and working and such. But it is amazing to me. And Sarah said this when we moved. She was like, "Wow. There's a lot of cables to connect here." Like this, there's just a ton. I have 3 PCs and some other things. And so it was just, when you think about your setup, there's just a lot of connections there. So anyways, Clay is back. Clay, can you hear us?
He's unfrozen.
Clay, can you hear us? He's looking.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh,
can you hear me?
Hey, yeah, we can. There may be a slight delay, so we may step
Sorry,
on
I'm on an ancient phone.
No worries.
That's all right.
No worries. What's your question?
So I asked a question earlier about relationship between unique downloads and total downloads.
Yeah. Where are you getting that
I
stat
guess
from?
if that's not a stat, that's Blueberry. They give you like your big number up front, and then if you click on the episode itself, it'll take you to the page, and there's underneath that is unique downloads.
Got it. If I remember, and Daniel's much more versed in Blueberry stats than I am. I need it, but basically I know with Libsyn, most places just show you the unique downloads, so you don't have the conversation that's going on right now. Basically, they're showing you filtered and unfiltered downloads, and the uniques are the ones that, for lack of a better phrase, count. Anything that's not unique would be if somebody downloads, if somebody's sitting on your website and they download it twice, that might be counted as 2 downloads. It's all going to depend on, because then we get into whole IAB standards and that gets weird. But that's what I've always understood it as, is they showed unfiltered stats because we have that number at Libsyn. We just don't show it to people because then they go, wait, why is this number bigger? And it's like, oh, that's all the bots and that's all the, the other things. But I believe that's what that number is. The unique downloads is the one that's basically that counts for the IAB and all the other things like that.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. It's been really consistent that unique downloads are always about 63% of, or 60 something percent of the total downloads. And these ones were a lot higher. I didn't know if there was.
It might be, that one's getting shared more. So you're getting more unique downloads than, more, for lack of a better phrase, more listeners than whatever weird, bots are hitting it before this one's actually getting more humans, maybe, or more or less spammy kind of downloads. So might be.
Sure. Makes sense. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the show.
Oh, no problem.
Thanks for trying. I appreciate that on the old phone. Good work.
Yeah. Daniel says unique is counting only 1 download per IP address. Even the address is known to be shared, like a college or something sort of public Wi-Fi. So
yeah, if you were in a situation where you were podcasting to an audience, maybe it's even a really nichey, where you're going to get a bunch of employees from one place to listen to it during the day. That unique number is going to be pretty low because they're all coming in from work or whatever. But again, I am just a huge fan of coming up with other metrics. I mean, downloads are great. You should measure them. I think you should always measure them in relation to themselves. So don't Home Gadget Geeks has, I get 500 to 700 downloads in the first 3 weeks, 2 weeks, something like that. And so I compare that to itself. Does that mean it's only 500 to 700 people listening? No. We know there's just all kinds of weirdness in the system. Could it be more? Yeah. Could it be less? Yeah. But am I doing week over week? Am I doing percentage changes, or what's the general trends? So I use download numbers to really, even at work, to kind of measure the general trends. Are we going up? Are we going down? Are we staying the same? Like, what are we doing? But audience engagement's way more important. I think you need to have some kind of metric or something in your show, whether it's a newsletter or a coupon code or something. So I find a way that they can actually engage with you. And that's the important number, I think, is that you're actually driving them to do something.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing this week on the School of Podcasting is the question of the month. And I'm always amazed at how much feedback I get. Sometimes I get more than others, but this week it was like off the chart, because yesterday was the cutoff for that. If you want to send it in today, I'll still let you in because I'm doing the show tomorrow. But I was amazed. It's always the last day, whatever the cutoff day is, when I get like 5 or 6 people sending it in going, please let me get in. So,
hey, can I ask you a question, Dave?
Sure.
So I was telling, before Clay jumped in, I was telling you about the studio move.
Yeah.
And the question that I always have on this, so I moved into an office that has office white walls, right? That color, that eggshell, whatever it is, right? Whatever that is. And at Gallup, we don't, it's just painted office white, What do you think is an optimal background? We've talked about this before. Last week, you talked about, you got a banner, you got pictures. Here at home, I've got I've got a bookshelf with some books. I used to have skis. We talked about those all the time. Speaking of that, I didn't turn on my TV. Darn it. I broke the streak. But what do you think? And I'm going to throw this to the chat room as well. Like and this is like, this is an art question in some ways, I think, because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But what do you think is an optimal background, Dave, as people are watching on video? Again, talking head, YouTube style, like what we're doing right now. What do you think is the optimal background?
See, part of it, I actually like when I see somebody's like bedroom, straight up bedroom, because to me that's the old keeping it real kind of thing. I've seen people spend tons of cash on making the perfect backdrop with, lighting and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, which is cool, but that's primarily, I think, because they're going to go video and audio. So,
Carrie says not white because of the auto exposure features on most cameras. I'm using a C920. I do get some control over that, so I can warm up flat, just coming out flat. Yeah, I'm super white in there. I just did a test last night. The lighting, actually, the fluorescent lighting is really good in there. It's indirect, and there's some great stuff.
There you go. Ryan's got it. Just paint it fluorescent green. You have a built-in green screen.
Well, I could. I'm not a big fan of
green screen.
Not for me. Other people do it great, but I'm not a, because what happens with most green screen folks is then they put exotic locations behind them that aren't real. And you're like, they're not real. You're not sitting in a jungle, or you're not at Disneyland, or
I don't think you're podcasting from the beach
or a mountain. Like, no, none of those things happen. But then that's the temptation of most podcasters, is they put these, instead of kind of putting, I had used a dark green wood, kind of looked like I was podcasting from a court somewhere, it was this heavy green wood. I think you've seen me there before on Saturdays. Yeah.
I always thought you were like a judge, like you're up on a big,
someone bring me the head of a pig. And and so but by the way, I stole that joke. That's a Brian Regan joke. I don't want plagiarism. I stole Brian Regan's joke there. Okay. So, but so green screen option, not white. I don't know. What else? What do you think, Dave?
And this is for Gallup?
Yeah, it's work related. One of my thoughts is to go get a big, gigantic globe. Not globe, but map of the world, and just put that
might work
there. Right?
Ryan did one. He's TeePublic. You can get, because the fun thing with, I need to go get this someday and just slap it up there with some duct tape. I have a vinyl banner, and I need to either adjust my lighting. I just need to get new lighting, period. But I'm pretty sure that's going to reflect off that vinyl banner, the lighting, depending on how I have it. Ryan got a cloth tapestry, whatever you want to call it, a big blanket with his logo on it. And I was like, that's an interesting idea, because it looks good, but it's going to be much less reflective. $30. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, really? Because I forget what I paid for the banner, but it wasn't $30. And so that might be an interesting way to go.
What do you think about gray? Like, one of our logo colors is gray. I know there's a lot of different kinds of gray. It's kind of a darker gray, like it's not charcoal, but not, kind of. Yeah. All of a sudden I need to, start pulling on RGB numbers, but a gray background. One of the things we have some, we're able to print those big, where it says, Gallup.
Yeah.
But that's too busy for me. We have one of those in Washington, D.C., and I don't like that look where it's just the repetitive thing on there. But what about just like a darker gray in the background? What do you think about that?
I think no matter what color it is, eventually, because to me, it's like, I was thinking like this dark blue would be kind of a cool color.
Yeah.
I think it's
good. Matches the color of my eyes.
Yeah, there you go. Brings out the blue in your eyes. That would be good. What's Gallup's official color?
Well, we're greens and grays.
Yeah, so that might tie in.
Yeah.
To it.
Well, we've got an official gray, and it's on all of our backdrop stuff. Maybe I can see if I can find a picture of it. But David says like a battleship gray. That's exactly kind of what we're what it is. Yeah. Okay. Any other
And
thoughts while we're trying to get
Master Cauldron is kind of trying to come in. There he is.
There
There's
it
his.
is.
There's his.
There we go.
I'm gonna lock on him here real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can see his tapestry.
Yeah, I was just jumping in to show you that it actually came from T Public. Like I said, I think it was 30, 40 bucks, but I was really amazed with the quality of it.
The wall hanging behind you, that's what you're talking about?
Yeah, and it hides his.
Yeah, when I started working from home and doing some podcasts from home, our VP of marketing said, "Hey, can you cover that bookshelf? Like, I don't like the busyness of the bookshelf." And so it looks like that's what you did, the exact same thing. I don't like it the way you have it because you cover the most important part of it when you're talking. I think like your logo's in the center and you're covering your logo. So I
just got it, so I've got some moving around to do. But you're right.
Yeah, no, you spent a whole bunch of money on your on the design, right? And we almost want to see it in some way. I'd almost move it up higher so it's you see more of it. Just
right. Yeah, and this one I think is a 8x6, and they come in 3 different sizes. That's the largest one that they have, but.
Interesting. Yeah, it's. I didn't realize it did stuff like that. You can actually have posters made and all sorts of other fun stuff. I asked. I have an interview with James from T Public in the can. I got to bust out, but I think he said next year, which really, when you think about it, is going to be here before you know it. They're going to have the ability to print on the back of your T-shirts as well. Right now, they're just the front. And I was kind of like, oh, because I would love to have a slogan, and then like my school of podcasting.com on the back. And he said, yeah, that's next year. And I'm like, oh, cool. So I didn't realize they did things like posters and
what's the process to build one of those? What did you have to do? How good of a graphic did you have to give them? How did that work to make that?
My graphic is 25 by 2500 by 1700 or something like that. PNG. And it's in all of the standard. When you upload the image, then you get to choose what all product I want: coffee mugs, books, whatever made. So I just threw it in there and ordered one for myself, and probably going to order a couple more to take with me. It's probably about a 200 thread count sheet that it's printed on.
Nice.
You're happy with that quality?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, my cat attacked the bottom corner of it, and it stood up. So my couch did not.
Test it.
Yeah, so
test it. No, hey, thanks for jumping in and showing that to us. I think that's another good option for us as we think about it. We wanted to get in the studio first and kind of see what the lighting would look like, and I'll probably do a couple shows this week without any changes, but the maintenance guys, when I said we might need to paint it a color, he's like, "Oh, no problem. I'll have that done in an hour." So It was, so I'm not as worried about making it quick, or I don't have to do it. I'll have a maintenance guy come in and paint it. But I like that. I like seeing those options. That's kind of handy. Thanks for jumping in and showing to us.
Appreciate it, guys. See you later.
All right. Thanks for jumping in. That's pretty cool.
It is. I saw. I was like,
cool.
I was like, that is something I had not thought of, and
you could string that like you talked about. You could string that on you could get some like 3/4 inch PVC.
Yeah.
Loop it, put it on there, and then hang it that way too, like a flag.
Yeah. So, but in the post show, we're going to be talking. He said turning up volume, but I'm not hearing. There we go. We're going to be talking. Carrie sent over a launch question, so we'll be talking about that. And then Jim, what's coming up on
Dave? How do people get the post show? Like how do they do that?
You go to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome and become one of our awesome supporters. And I need to go in and see how many episodes. It's a lot of bonus content over there, along with product reviews and little quick tips on podcasting, things like that. Cool. And it can be as little as $1.
Nice. Yeah,
So-
support Dave. Get over there and get it done. The at the averageguy.tv, I did a solo show. I don't do a lot of those, but a solo show this week. So I'm building a robot lawnmower. Did I mention that? I think maybe I mentioned it last week. So part of the show, we're building a robot lawnmower. So we kick off the robot lawnmower series, the averageguy.tv.
Nice. And this week we will have the question of the month, which is where are you if 1 is like, yay, podcasting, and 10 is where are you on a scale from 1 to 10 with podcasting and why? And we got some interesting responses. I thought that was pretty cool. So that'll be coming up Monday on the School of Podcasting. We're here every Saturday morning, 10:30 Eastern time. AskThePodcastCoach.com/live. Thanks for tuning in. And I talked a little too fast. We'll be here. But that's okay.
Well, I'm hoping the mud jacking is done by the time we get out of here. Yeah, the mud jacking is done and level and dry.